In 1996, a French linguist died 3 weeks after publishing his translation of a tablet nobody else had been allowed to photograph. The tablet named a location on Earth and the year the original owners would return to it. What he translated was not a prophecy in the religious sense. It was a schedule, with coordinates, with conditions, and with a name for the place where the reckoning begins. His name was Dr. Etienne Marchand. He held the chair in Akkadian philology at the Sorbonne and had been working with cuneiform texts for 31 years when a private collector in Geneva contacted him in 1992. The collector possessed a clay fragment that had moved through 3 intermediaries after the First Gulf War in 1991. Its origin was untraceable on paper. Its surface was intact. Marchand was granted the right to translate it, but not to photograph it, and not to share it with any institution until his work was complete. He published in March 1996 through a small academic press in Lyon. The print run was 400 copies. He died on April 14th of that year. The death was recorded as natural. The fragment was returned to the collector and has not been seen on a public registry since. Its catalog number is VAT 15732. It was withdrawn from public listing after 1998. In 2014, Dr. Harold Bixby at the University of Chicago obtained one of the original 400 copies through an estate sale. He spent 6 years cross-referencing Marchand's translation against every comparable Sumerian and Akkadian source he could access. His conclusion, published in 2020, was that the translation was sound, the grammar held, the astronomical references checked, and the location named in the fragment was real. The tablet describes a return, not a visit, not a teaching, not a renewal of the original contract between the Anunnaki and the humans they created, a return for accounting. The text uses a specific Sumerian term, kishpu shuma, that Marchand translated as the reckoning of the debt. It does not appear in any other known Sumerian document. The fragment names 4 conditions. Each one is described as a violation of the original agreement under which humanity was permitted to exist on this planet. When all 4 are met, the Anunnaki return. The tablet states the conditions in sequence and gives the place where the return begins. The place is named in the fragment as Nunki, the Sumerian designation for what archaeologists today identify as Eridu, the first city ever built on Earth. The 4 conditions, as Marchand rendered them: the working of the bloodline, the splitting of the firestone, the burning of the gold heir, and the breaking of the houses of names. These are not symbolic phrases. They describe specific human activities, and the tablet provides enough context to identify each one with precision. An Akkadian cylinder seal recovered from the ruins of Nippur in 1903 and currently held in the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin contains a near-identical passage. It does not mention Eridu by name. Instead, it describes the place where the waters were first divided, the location where the Anunnaki vessel originally settled. The geographical markers in the seal text point to the head of the Persian Gulf. Modern bathymetric surveys of the Gulf floor confirm that during the period from 4000 to 3000 BCE, the coastline extended significantly further inland. Eridu sat directly on the ancient shoreline. What is now a submerged shelf was then dry land. What is now Eridu's ruined ziggurat was then a port. The Book of Enoch, written in fragments between the 3rd and 1st centuries BCE and preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox canon, contains a parallel account. The Watchers descended to a specific location on Earth, taught humans forbidden knowledge, and were sealed away with a promise. The promise was that they would return when the prohibitions they imposed had been broken. Enoch names 4 prohibitions. They are not identical to Marchand's 4, but the structural pattern matches. A contract, 4 violations, a return tied to those violations. Satellite imagery of the northern Persian Gulf Shelf published by a joint Iraqi-British survey in 2017 identified 17 anomalous geometric formations beneath 30 to 50 meters of water, arranged in a pattern consistent with a Bronze Age urban complex. The formations sit approximately 40 kilometers off the modern coastline, on a direct line extending from Eridu southeast into the Gulf. The survey team requested funding for follow-up sonar mapping. The funding was approved in 2019, then quietly withdrawn in early 2020. No follow-up has been conducted since. The withdrawal of that funding is part of a longer pattern. In April 2003, during the looting of the Iraq National Museum in Baghdad, approximately 15,000 artifacts disappeared. Most were small objects taken opportunistically, but the basement storage area, which required keys and knowledge of the layout, was selectively cleared. Witnesses on site reported that the looters moved with purpose through specific aisles. The shelves cleared were the shelves containing Eridu period tablets and the Akkadian astronomical fragments catalogued under Section 7 of the basement registry. Marchand's source tablet was not in that museum, but the supporting documentation, the cross-references, the comparative texts that would have allowed independent scholars to verify his translation, those were in Section 7. They have not been recovered. Bixby's 2020 paper attempted to reconstruct the original supporting corpus from photographs taken before 2003. He succeeded in identifying 17 of the 23 texts Marchand had cited. The remaining 6 are presumed lost. Now to the 4 conditions. Each one is a violation. Each one is dated. The first, the working of the bloodline. Marchand translated this as the deliberate manipulation of the inherited essence that distinguishes one living being from another. In November 2018, a Chinese researcher named He Jiankui announced the birth of 2 infants whose embryonic DNA had been edited using CRISPR-Cas9 to disable the CCR5 gene. This was the first confirmed instance of heritable human genetic modification. The Anunnaki, according to the original creation accounts preserved in the Atrahasis epic, modified an existing primate genome to produce the first human worker. The bloodline was theirs to shape. The first condition was crossed on the date that authority was claimed by the creation. The second, the splitting of the firestone. Marchand connected this term to passages in the Enuma Elish describing the substance the Anunnaki used as their primary energy source. The descriptions match the behavior of fissile material. The first sustained nuclear chain reaction occurred in Chicago on December 2, 1942. Atmospheric testing began in 1945. Between 1945 and 1996, more than 2,000 nuclear detonations have been recorded. The second condition was crossed 8 decades ago and has been continuously violated since. The third, the burning of the gold air. The Sumerian creation narrative states that the Anunnaki came to Earth to mine gold, which they suspended in their home planet's upper atmosphere to reflect solar radiation and stabilize their climate. Earth's atmosphere has been progressively destabilized through the industrial release of carbon compounds. The structural symmetry, theirs preserved by mineral particulates, ours destroyed by mineral combustion, is what Marchand's tablet identifies as the violation. Industrial-scale emissions crossed the threshold marked in the fragment sometime during the late 20th century. The fourth, the breaking of the houses of names. The Sumerian EMU, literally House of Names, refers to the temple archives where the genealogies, the records of the Anunnaki teachings, and the cuneiform tablets themselves were stored. The looting of the Iraq National Museum in 2003 and the destruction of archaeological sites across Iraq and Syria between 2014 and 2017 constitute the fourth violation. The tablet specifies this as the final trigger. Once the houses of names are broken, the return is initiated. All 4 conditions are now met. Bixby ran the astronomical chronology from the tablet against the orbital mechanics of the proposed long-period body associated in the Sumerian texts with the Anunnaki homeworld. The fragment specifies that the return follows the 4th violation by a window of 1 to 2 generations. Using the conservative end of that window, his calculation produced an arrival range of 2040 to 2077. He published the range without claiming it as a prediction. He described it as the chronological output of the fragment's own logic. The location named in the tablet is Eridu. Modern site designation, Tel Abu Shahrain, coordinates 30 degrees 48 minutes north by 45 degrees 59 minutes east. Southern Iraq, T-Kar Governorate, approximately 24 kilometers southwest of the modern town of Nasiriyah. Current conditions at the site are not stable. The Iraqi Geological Survey recorded a 340% increase in low-magnitude seismic activity in the Dhikar region between 2019 and 2024. The Persian Gulf shoreline, approximately 50 kilometers south of Eridu, has been advancing inland at a measurable rate, with salt intrusion now reaching agricultural land that was freshwater irrigated within living memory. Oil extraction operations within 30 kilometers of the Eridu ruin field have intensified since 2021, with 3 new wells drilled directly over the projected extension of the ancient coastline. The site itself remains officially open to archaeologists, but access has been progressively restricted. The Iraqi State Board of Antiquities reduced the permitted excavation window from 8 months per year to 2 between 2022 and 2024. No reason was given. The ziggurat of Eridu, the oldest known religious structure on Earth, stands at the center of the ruin field. It was dedicated to Enki, the Anunnaki figure who, according to the same body of texts, opposed the destruction of humanity during the original flood. The tablet that Marchand translated does not say what role Enki plays in the return. It says only that the return begins where he first descended, and that the city built over his landing place will be the first to receive the accounting. Marchand's published volume contains one passage in his own commentary that Bixby chose to reproduce in full in his 2020 paper. Marchand wrote it after completing the translation, but before submitting the manuscript. The passage is not a conclusion. It is closer to a note written in the margin of his working draft that he chose to include in the printed edition. The passage reads, "The fragment does not threaten. It records. The voice in the clay is administrative. It is the voice of an authority that left and that intends, in its own time and by its own measure, to come back. The question the fragment does not answer is whether the return is for all of us or only for those who remained at the gate. The ziggurat at Eridu has stood at the gate for 5,000 years. If you want to see more of what the textbooks refuse to discuss, subscribe.